Former Acting Attorney General Sally Yates is expected to testify for the first time next week regarding her warnings to the White House about former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. She is expected to reveal she believed Flynn's relations with the Russian ambassador left him compromised. Just weeks after the warning, Flynn was fired for misleading the vice president about those connections. Bill Powell is a senior writer at Newsweek and the author of this week's cover story, 1 Million Dead: What War with North Korea Would Look Like. He also served as the magazine's former Moscow bureau chief. Welcome to you.
Thanks for having me, Elaine.
So on Tuesday, President Trump spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin for the first time since U.S. airstrikes in Syria. But investigations into the Trump administration's ties to Russia are far from over. What should we expect between the two countries going forward from here?
I would think that President Trump will try to focus on Syria, number one, in discussions with President Putin, and secondarily with North Korea. I don't think President Trump will allow the noise around the alleged ties of some of his former administration members to Moscow, to business interests in Moscow, will frankly deter him from dealing with what is very serious business at this point. Now, I'm not sure there's a whole lot of room to negotiate between Putin and Trump on Syria, but I think the phone call today is at least a start, and for the White House to determine whether, in fact, there is anything to talk about in terms of a move towards something like a ceasefire there.
Bill, you mentioned North Korea. Do you foresee the United States working with Russia on the issue of North Korea?
I think they're secondary players in this. I'm sure they would welcome any diplomatic pressure or economic pressure that Moscow could conceivably exert on Pyongyang. But the main player here is China in terms of the U.S. Trying to get to a diplomatic resolution. Just as previous presidents have, the Trump administration has come to the conclusion, rightly or wrongly, that very little can change in North Korea without a serious push from Beijing, which is the North's lone ally.
Well, in an interview Monday, President Trump said he'd, quote, be honored to meet with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. Yeah. But he also did not rule out military intervention. What are your thoughts on the possibility of a preemptive strike by the U.S.?
A preemptive strike is the last option on the table, as well it should be. I think I understand the thinking at the White House as to why they're raising the issue, why they're saying repeatedly that no option is off the table. It's because they want to get Kim Jong-un's attention, and I think they wanted to get Beijing's attention and President Xi's attention. I think they've been successful in doing that, and I think the moderating tone that we've heard in the last 2 days and that you alluded to is probably coming at Beijing's behest. I think they were unnerved by some of the rhetoric they were hearing out of Washington, countenancing a potential military strike, and probably have told the Trump administration to cool it a little bit, and to perhaps send some signals, as both Secretary of State Tillerson and now the President have, that, look, conceivably we would meet with Kim Jong-un if the conditions were right. That, if the conditions were right, could be an attractive offer to the North Korean leader. And I think that's the sort of rhetoric China wants to hear, as opposed to the talk about preemptive strikes. They don't want to hear that.
Bill, I want to ask you about the focus of your piece. What would war with North Korea look like?
The last time the United States seriously contemplated going to the military option, going to war on the Korean Peninsula, was back in 1994 when Bill Clinton was president, and there were serious concerns about the then state of the North Korean nuclear program. He asked Bill Perry, his then Secretary of Defense, to game out what the scenario would look like in terms of casualties and economic damage. And the Defense Department came back with estimates of 1 million dead in the simulations that it ran. And I have talked to officials in every succeeding administration since then, and no one seriously disputes that as a baseline estimate as to what a war on on the peninsula would look like. There is virtually no scenario in which the United States can take out the 10,000 artillery batteries that the North has aligned very close to the DMZ, well within the 30-mile range in which Seoul sits. They would get shots off, and those shots would be devastating, both in terms of the loss of human life and obviously to the damage it would do to one of the engines of Northeast Asian prosperity, the capital city of Seoul.
1 million dead, though. It is horrific to even contemplate. I wonder what your sense of the messaging, the effect of the messaging from the Trump administration, do you think that has escalated or de-escalated the situation?
I think at the moment it's very hard to tell. I think the message from Beijing is, look, chill out on the rhetoric, as I said, and we'll take a crack at this. I think Washington is in the wait-and-see mode. That is what that is what President Trump asked of Xi Jinping at the Mar-a-Lago summit. We will see if Beijing can truly exert some leverage that makes a difference in terms of the behavior of Kim Jong-un. I've always been in the camp of those who do believe that there is leverage there, that Beijing does have influence with Pyongyang. The question is, how willing are they really to use it, and will they inflict serious economic pain on the regime and frankly the citizenry in order to achieve the diplomatic goals that both it and Washington seek, which is a resolution of the nuclear and long-range missile issue on diplomatic terms and not on military terms.
Because, Bill, wouldn't it be in China's own interest to have a stable, a somewhat relatively stable situation with North Korea?
Precisely right. And that is why I think it was very important that in an interview over the weekend, Secretary Tillerson said that we seek we don't seek regime change, and we seek stability on the Korean Peninsula. This is a moment when the interests, I think, of the United States and of China's are aligning. They are coming into alignment. The question is whether the two of us can work together to come to some sort of acceptable resolution. I think, alas, that we don't necessarily know the answer to that yet.
Very much an open question. All right, Bill Powell, thank you so much for your insight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.